The night started with laughter, flashing blue lights, and music echoing down the block, the kind of joyful noise that brings people together. Kids were dancing, officers were grilling burgers, and neighbors were smiling under strings of lights stretched across the community park. It was supposed to be simple, a police charity event raising money for families in need. Then the sirens came. At first, nobody reacted. We were surrounded by police cars already, after all. But these sirens sounded different, urgent, fast, cutting through the music like a warning. Conversations stopped, heads turned, the cheerful atmosphere shifted into confusion. 2 patrol units pulled up sharply near the entrance. Officers stepped out, hands near their radios, scanning the crowd. I felt my stomach drop. I recognized one of them immediately. He looked just as confused as I felt. He walked toward me quickly, lowering his voice. "We got a 911 call," he said. "Noise disturbance. Possible disorderly gathering." I blinked at him. "You're kidding." Behind us, families watched anxiously. Kids clutched balloons. Volunteers froze mid-step. The band stopped playing, leaving only the sound of radios crackling. The officer sighed. Caller reported loud shouting, flashing lights, possible public intoxication. I looked around at uniformed officers handing out hot dogs and community volunteers running donation tables. "This is literally a police event," I said. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, we figured that out when we arrived." Across the street, I noticed movement, a woman standing with crossed arms, phone in hand, watching with visible satisfaction. I knew exactly who she was. Every neighborhood had one, the self-appointed rule enforcer. The WA Karen. She didn't like events, didn't like crowds, didn't like anything that didn't fit her perfect image of quiet suburbia. Apparently, she disliked charity too. The arriving officers relaxed once they realized the situation, but the damage was done. The energy had changed. Parents whispered. Volunteers exchanged nervous glances. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of leaving quietly, the responding officer walked straight toward the woman across the street. I watched her expression shift from confident to uncertain. They spoke briefly. Her arms started moving aggressively, pointing toward the event. The officer listened calmly, expression unreadable. A crowd began noticing. When the conversation ended, the officer turned back toward us, shaking his head slightly. But before he could walk away, another patrol car pulled in, and this one carried a supervisor. The atmosphere tightened again. The supervisor stepped out, scanning the event with a slow, careful look. His eyes landed on the charity banners, the officers volunteering, the donation boxes. Then he looked across the street at the woman still arguing. His expression changed instantly. I realized something right then. This call wasn't just an inconvenience anymore. It was about to become a story nobody here would forget. And the event had only just started. The supervisor walked slowly through the crowd, taking everything in with a practiced eye. Children laughed near the face painting station. Officers in uniform handed out drinks. Volunteers collected donations beside a banner that read Community First Police Charity Drive. Nothing about the scene matched the chaos described in the 911 call. He stopped beside me. "You coordinating this?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, sir. We filed permits, notified the city, even sent notices to the WA." He raised an eyebrow. "WA was informed." "Twice," I said. Across the street, the woman grew louder, gesturing dramatically while speaking to one of the responding officers. She looked convinced she was winning. People had started noticing her now, whispers spreading as quickly as the music had earlier. The supervisor sighed. "Let me guess, noise complaints. And disorderly conduct," I added. He glanced at the donation tables. "Looks very dangerous," he said dryly. A few nearby officers chuckled quietly. The band restarted, softly at first, trying to bring the atmosphere back. But tension lingered. Parents stayed close to their kids. Volunteers kept checking the street. No one wanted trouble at a charity event. The supervisor walked toward the woman. I watched carefully. She immediately launched into a speech, hands waving, voice raised enough for half the street to hear. "They're disturbing the peace," she said. "Flashing lights, loud music, people everywhere. This neighborhood has rules." The supervisor listened patiently. When she finished, he asked a simple question. "Ma'am, do you realize this event is being run by the police department?" She hesitated. "I don't care who it is. Rules apply to everyone." The officer beside him shifted uncomfortably. The supervisor remained calm. "And you called 911? "Yes," she said proudly. "Someone had to do something." I saw his expression tighten slightly, The way officers look when they're trying very hard to stay professional. Because 911 calls aren't jokes. They tie up emergency resources. They divert units from real crises. He spoke quietly to her, too low for me to hear, but her face changed instantly. The confidence began slipping. Meanwhile, the event slowly recovered. Kids returned to games. Music grew louder again. Donations resumed. But now people were watching the street more than the stage. A volunteer approached me. "Is everything okay?" she whispered. "Yeah," I said. "Just a misunderstanding." But I wasn't sure that was true. The supervisor walked back toward us a few minutes later. "She insists this violates WA quiet hours," he said. I frowned. "Quiet hours? It's barely evening." He nodded. "Exactly." Just then, another car pulled up, this one not a patrol unit. The WA president stepped out, clearly surprised to see multiple police vehicles already there. He scanned the event, then spotted the woman. And the look on his face said he hadn't expected this either. He walked quickly toward her, whispering sharply. She pointed toward the music again, frustrated. He shook his head repeatedly. Whatever she was saying, he didn't agree. The supervisor crossed his arms. Interesting. I watched the scene unfold and felt something shift. This wasn't just a complaint anymore. Something else was happening, something bigger than noise levels. Then the WA president turned toward me, looking nervous. "Can we talk privately?" he asked. The way he said it made my stomach tighten. Because when WA leaders suddenly want private conversations, trouble usually follows. I stepped away from the music and followed the WA president toward the edge of the parking area. Behind us, the event slowly returned to life, kids laughing again, grills sizzling, donation tables busy. But the tension lingered like a quiet storm waiting to break. The president lowered his voice. "First, I want to say, we approved this event." I nodded. "I know. I have the emails." He rubbed the back of his neck nervously. "That's the problem." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He glanced toward the woman still arguing near the patrol cars. "She didn't want it approved. She's been complaining for weeks. Said it would bring chaos, traffic, trouble. So she called 911 anyway." He exhaled slowly. "I think she wanted the police to shut it down." The irony almost made me laugh. Calling the police, on a police event. Before I could respond, the supervisor joined us. "Everything all right?" he asked. The president forced a smile. "Just clarifying things." The supervisor's expression said he wasn't convinced. Across the street, the woman noticed us talking and immediately marched over. Her face was red, voice already rising. "This is exactly what I mean," she snapped. People whispering, rules ignored, noise everywhere. The president sighed. "Linda, please." "No," she interrupted. "This neighborhood has standards." I stayed calm. Years of dealing with angry people made it easier to keep my tone steady. "The event has permits," I said. "And it's raising money for families." "I don't care," she shot back. "I called 911 for a reason." The supervisor stepped forward gently. "Ma'am, 911 is for emergencies." "This is an emergency," she insisted. "They're disturbing the peace." Around us, more neighbors had started watching. Phones came out. Conversations quieted. You could feel the moment becoming bigger than anyone wanted. The WA president whispered urgently to her, but she ignored him completely. Then she turned toward the crowd and pointed at the patrol cars. "These flashing lights make people nervous," she shouted. "This isn't a circus." A few officers exchanged looks. One volunteer looked like she might cry. Weeks of planning reduced to public drama in seconds. The supervisor's tone hardened slightly. "Ma'am, these officers are volunteering on their day off." For a moment, she hesitated. The crowd's mood was shifting against her. People weren't nodding anymore. They were staring. She realized it too. Her voice softened, but the anger remained. "I just want quiet." And then a neighbor spoke up from the crowd. "This is the first fun event we've had in years," someone said. Another voice added, "My kids love this." The energy flipped completely. What started as whispers turned into open support for the event. The woman looked stunned, like she hadn't expected anyone to challenge her publicly. The WA president stepped forward quickly. "The event stays," he said firmly. Her eyes widened. "You're siding with them." "I'm siding with what we approved," he replied. She took a step back, face flushed with embarrassment, but something in her expression warned me she wasn't done. She looked directly at me and said quietly, "You'll regret this." Before I could answer, she turned and walked away fast. The supervisor watched her leave. "That's not about noise," he muttered. I nodded slowly. "No, it's something else." Just then, one of the officers near the parking lot called out, "Hey, whose car is blocking the fire lane?" Everyone turned at once, and the vehicle sitting there belonged to her. Every head turned toward the fire lane. A silver SUV sat parked diagonally across the clearly marked red curb, blocking emergency access to the event area. The irony landed instantly. The same woman who claimed she was protecting safety had parked in the one spot that actually created a hazard. The supervising officer sighed quietly. "That's a problem." The HOA president rubbed his forehead again, as if his patience had officially run out. "That's Linda's car," he muttered. One of the officers approached the vehicle, checking the license plate. Confirmation came quickly. Across the street, the woman noticed everyone looking and froze mid-step. Her confidence flickered. For the first time all evening, she looked unsure. The supervisor waved her over politely. "Ma'am, is this your vehicle?" She hesitated. "Yes, but I was just..." "You can't block a fire lane," he said calmly. "Especially at a public event." Her voice rose immediately. "Well, there weren't any spaces." The officer's expression stayed neutral. "That doesn't change the law." People nearby exchanged glances. A few quietly laughed. The shift in power was obvious now. The attention she wanted had turned against her. She crossed her arms defensively. "So now you're targeting me?" "No," the supervisor said evenly. "We're enforcing safety rules." The HOA president stepped back, clearly deciding he wanted no part of this conversation. After a brief pause, the supervisor gave her a choice: move the vehicle or risk a citation. She marched toward the SUV, muttering under her breath, keys shaking in her hand. As she pulled away, the crowd slowly exhaled. Music resumed. Conversations restarted. The charity event finally felt like itself again. But something still didn't sit right. The supervisor stood beside me watching her drive off. "People don't usually escalate like that unless there's something else going on," he said. I nodded. "You think she'll come back?" He shrugged. "Maybe not tonight." The event regained momentum fast. Donations increased, maybe fueled by the drama. Kids returned to the bounce house. Officers laughed with families. For a moment, everything felt normal again. Then my phone buzzed. A message from another officer working dispatch. "FYI, same caller has reported this event 3 times tonight." I stared at the screen. "She keeps calling," I asked out loud. The supervisor overheard. "How many?" 3. He shook his head slowly. "That's misuse of emergency services." Across the park, I noticed the HOA president talking with a few residents, looking embarrassed but relieved the event continued. The mood had shifted permanently. People were having fun again, and they didn't want it ruined. The sun dipped lower, lights glowing brighter against the evening sky. The band played louder, laughter echoing through the neighborhood. And then another patrol car arrived. Not fast, not urgent, but deliberate. The officer stepped out and walked straight toward the supervisor, whispering something I couldn't hear. The supervisor's relaxed posture vanished instantly. He turned to me. "I need you to stay calm," he said quietly. "What happened?" I asked. He hesitated. "We just got another call." I frowned. "About noise again?" He shook his head slowly. "No, this one says there's a fight at the event." I looked around at smiling families and officers handing out food. There was no fight, which meant one thing: someone was trying very hard to shut this down, no matter what it took. The words hit harder than I expected. "A fight," I repeated, scanning the crowd. Kids laughed near the game tables. Officers flipped burgers. Volunteers handed out raffle tickets. There wasn't even an argument, let alone a fight. The supervisor nodded grimly. "Dispatch received a report of multiple people fighting near the stage." I exhaled slowly. "That's completely false." "Yeah," he said, "but we still have to respond." Another patrol unit rolled closer, lights flashing briefly before shutting off. Officers stepped out, already realizing something didn't add up. People stared nervously again. The cheerful energy dipped for the second time that night. The band stopped mid-song. Parents pulled their kids closer. I hated that look, the moment when a positive event suddenly feels uncertain. The supervisor walked through the crowd with 2 officers, checking everything carefully. No chaos, no yelling, just confused faces. He radioed dispatch. "Negative on disturbance. Event is orderly." Across the street, I spotted movement near a parked car. The same silver SUV. The woman sat inside, phone held up near her face. Even from a distance, I could tell she was watching everything unfold. I felt a knot form in my stomach. "She's still calling," I said quietly. One of the officers followed my gaze inside. "Looks like it." The supervisor walked toward the edge of the park, expression serious. He spoke into his radio again, then turned to me. Dispatch confirmed calls all came from the same number. I shook my head. She's tying up emergency lines just because she doesn't like this event. He nodded grimly. That's becoming a problem. Meanwhile, the crowd started whispering again. Volunteers looked frustrated. Some neighbors were angry now, not at us, but at the interruptions ruining a night meant for the community. A woman holding a donation envelope approached me. Is someone trying to stop this? She asked quietly. I forced a calm smile. We're handling it. But honestly, the repeated disruptions were wearing everyone down. The supervisor made a decision. He crossed the street toward the silver SUV with another officer beside him. The woman rolled her window down halfway, already defensive. I have a right to report problems. She snapped before he even spoke. Yes, he replied calmly. But intentionally making false reports is serious. She gestured wildly toward the park. It's too loud. People are drinking. Someone could get hurt. The officer remained patient. Ma'am, we've checked multiple times. There's no fight. She scoffed. You're just protecting them. The supervisor paused, choosing his words carefully. We're protecting emergency resources. Every false call takes units away from real emergencies. Her face tightened. For a moment, I thought she might understand. Instead, she crossed her arms again. So you're saying I can't call 911 now? That's not what I said, he replied. But calls must be truthful. Behind them, several neighbors had gathered silently, watching the conversation. The mood had shifted again, not fear this time, but disappointment. People realized the event's biggest problem wasn't noise. It was her. The supervisor handed back her ID after checking it. This is your warning, he said. She drove off slowly, tires crunching against the curb, but the look she gave the event promised she hadn't given up. As she disappeared down the street, the supervisor returned and shook his head. Hopefully that's the end. I wasn't so sure, because minutes later, my phone buzzed with a new alert from dispatch. And what I read made my blood run cold. Someone had just reported shots fired near the event. The message hit me like ice. Shots fired near the event. I looked up instantly, scanning the crowd. Kids were still laughing. Music played softly. Nobody looked scared, because nothing had happened. Yet within seconds, distant sirens grew louder. The supervisor swore under his breath. Everyone stay calm, he said quickly, grabbing his radio. Patrol units arrived fast this time, lights flashing across the park. The mood changed instantly. Parents grabbed their children. Conversations stopped. Volunteers froze, unsure what to do. Keep people relaxed, I told nearby officers. No panic. The last thing we needed was chaos from a false alarm. The responding officers moved through the area carefully, checking corners, scanning for any real threat. There was none. No shouting, no running, no signs of danger, just confusion. The band stepped away from the stage. Someone turned the music off completely. The silence felt heavy, unnatural. The supervisor radioed dispatch. No evidence of gunfire. Event secure. Across the street, I saw the same silver SUV again. My jaw tightened. She was parked farther away this time, watching from the shadows like she expected something dramatic to happen. The supervisor followed my gaze. You think she called that in? I nodded slowly. Who else? He sighed. That's crossing a line. False reports about noise were one thing. Reporting gunfire triggered high-priority responses. It pulled officers from real emergencies. It put civilians at risk of unnecessary panic. Nearby, a little girl tugged on her father's sleeve. Dad, are we safe? The father nodded quickly, but I could see fear in his eyes. That's when I realized how much damage one person could do with a phone. The supervisor made another call to dispatch, voice firm. Document this incident carefully. Officers finished clearing the area and relaxed slightly once the all clear came through. But the energy of the event had changed again. People whispered nervously. Some families quietly packed up early. The woman had succeeded, not in stopping the event officially, but in draining its joy. I watched the silver SUV pull away slowly. She keeps escalating, I said. The supervisor nodded. And that usually ends badly. A few minutes later, an officer approached us with a tablet. Dispatch logged all calls, he said quietly. Same caller every time. The supervisor rubbed his jaw. That's enough. He turned to me. I'm going to have another conversation with her. This needs to stop now. While he stepped aside to coordinate, I looked around the park. Volunteers tried to restart activities, smiling for the kids, but the excitement was thinner now. People kept glancing toward the road, waiting for the next interruption. The irony hurt. This event was supposed to build trust between police and the community. Instead, it had turned into a live demonstration of how quickly fear spreads. The supervisor returned with a serious expression. "We're heading to her house," he said. "Official warning. Maybe more." I nodded. "I'll stay here." As officers prepared to leave, the HOA president approached me quietly. "I had no idea she'd go this far," he admitted. I shrugged sadly. Some people don't like losing control. The patrol cars pulled away toward her house. The park slowly settled again. Then, just as the music started back up, my phone buzzed. A new message from the supervisor. "You need to come here. Now." I stared at the screen, heart racing. Whatever happened at her house wasn't what anyone expected. I left the park faster than I wanted to, telling another officer to help keep the event running. The drive to her house took less than 2 minutes, but the tension in my chest made it feel longer. Patrol cars lined the curb when I arrived, lights reflecting across quiet lawns. Something was wrong. The supervisor met me at the sidewalk, face serious. "Glad you're here," he said quietly. "What happened?" I asked. He motioned toward the open front door. "You need to see this." Inside, 2 officers stood near the living room, speaking softly. The house looked normal at first. Spotless furniture, neatly stacked papers, everything organized with almost obsessive care. But then I noticed the wall. Screens. Multiple monitors showing live camera feeds from around the neighborhood. Driveways. Backyards. Street corners. Even the charity event. I stared, stunned. "She's watching everyone." The supervisor nodded. "Looks like private surveillance. Some cameras are aimed at public spaces, others aren't." That explained the constant complaints. She wasn't just noticing things, she was monitoring them. Another officer held up a notebook filled with handwritten observations. Times, license plates, notes about neighbors coming and going. It felt less like an HOA member, and more like someone running a personal intelligence operation. "Is this legal?" I asked quietly. The supervisor shook his head slowly. "Depends where the cameras were placed. We're still figuring that out." One officer stepped in from the hallway. "She's in the kitchen," he said. I glanced over. The woman sat at the table, arms folded tightly, face pale. Gone was the loud confidence from earlier. She looked exhausted, like someone who had finally run out of energy to fight. She looked up when she saw me. "You," she said softly. I didn't respond. The supervisor spoke gently. "Ma'am, we need to discuss the false emergency calls tonight." She looked away. "I was protecting the neighborhood. By reporting gunfire that didn't happen." He asked. Silence. Her eyes darted toward the monitors. "People don't follow rules," she muttered. "Someone has to keep watch." The room felt heavy. I realized then that this wasn't just about noise complaints or HOA power. She genuinely believed she was in control, that she was responsible for everyone. And when she lost control, she escalated. The supervisor sighed. "We're going to need to document everything here." She nodded weakly, as if the fight had finally left her. Outside, neighbors had started gathering, whispering as they watched officers move in and out. The irony was impossible to miss. The person who complained about police presence now had half the department outside her home. An officer walked up to us. "Dispatch confirmed 6 false calls tonight," he said quietly. The supervisor nodded. "That's serious." He turned to me. "We're handling it officially from here." I stepped back, letting them work. As I walked outside, I noticed something else. Across the street, several neighbors looked relieved. Like they finally understood why the constant complaints and tension had been happening. The street felt lighter already. I returned to my car, ready to head back to the event, when my phone buzzed again. A text from one of the volunteers. "You should come back quickly, something amazing just happened." I looked toward the park, where music had started again in the distance. After everything tonight, I couldn't imagine what could possibly surprise me now. By the time I got back to the park, the atmosphere felt completely different. The tension was gone. Music played louder than before. People laughed without hesitation. Kids ran between game tables carrying balloons and cotton candy. The charity event, which had nearly collapsed under stress an hour earlier, was somehow more alive than ever. I walked toward the stage, confused. One of the volunteers spotted me and grinned. "You missed it," she said. "Everyone found out what happened." "What do you mean?" I asked. She nodded toward the crowd. People started sharing stories. About the complaints. About feeling watched. Once they realized they weren't the only ones, everything changed. I looked around and noticed small groups talking openly, something that hadn't happened earlier. Neighbors who usually kept to themselves were laughing together. Officers mingled easily with families. It felt less like an event, and more like a community finally breathing. The HOA president stepped up to the microphone unexpectedly. "Hey everyone," he said, voice slightly nervous. The music lowered. "Tonight started a little rough, but I just want to say, this event matters." Applause broke out immediately. He continued, "Sometimes one loud voice makes it feel like nobody agrees. But looking around tonight, I realize most of us wanted this all along." More applause. I saw people nodding, smiling. Even officers looked surprised. Then something else happened. A neighbor walked onto the stage carrying a donation bucket. "Since we had all that extra attention tonight," he joked, "let's make it count." Laughter spread across the crowd. People started lining up to donate, more than earlier. Bills folded into buckets, kids dropping coins, families cheering. The energy shifted from frustration to celebration. I stood there watching, slightly overwhelmed. The very drama meant to shut the event down had brought everyone closer. A young officer beside me shook his head. "Guess chaos has a silver lining." I smiled. "Sometimes." The band restarted with upbeat music. String lights glowed above the park. The supervisor returned shortly after, giving me a small nod from across the crowd, a silent confirmation that things at the house were under control. For the first time all night, I felt relaxed. Then the HOA president approached me quietly. "I owe you an apology," he said. "We should have handled her complaints differently." I shrugged lightly. "We all learned something tonight." He looked toward the crowd. "I think the neighborhood did too." As the evening continued, families stayed longer than planned. Kids danced near the stage. Officers posed for photos with smiling children. The event had transformed from a simple fundraiser into something deeper, a reminder that communities are stronger when people speak up for each other. Near the end of the night, the total donations were announced. The crowd gasped. It was nearly double what organizers expected. Cheers exploded across the park. I looked around and realized something important. The night that almost failed had turned into the most successful event we'd ever held. But just as I began to enjoy the moment, my phone buzzed again. A message from the supervisor. "She wants to speak with you before we finish paperwork." I stared at the screen. After everything that happened, I wasn't sure I wanted that conversation. But something told me it might explain everything. The music faded behind me as I left the park again, the sounds of laughter and celebration echoing down the street. The night had transformed in ways I never expected. What began as chaos ended with unity, yet there was one final loose end waiting at the house. Patrol cars were still parked outside, lights off now, the scene calm. The supervisor met me on the porch. "She asked specifically to talk to you," he said quietly. I nodded and stepped inside. The monitors were dark now, unplugged and stacked to the side. The house felt smaller without the glow of surveillance screens. She sat at the kitchen table, shoulders slumped, looking older than she had earlier. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she sighed. "I didn't think it would go this far." I pulled out a chair but stayed standing. "You called 911 3 times. She nodded faintly. "I thought if the event stopped, things would be quiet again." "Quiet isn't the same as safe," I said gently. Her eyes watered slightly. "People changed. The neighborhood changed." I didn't like not knowing what was happening. I looked at the boxed-up cameras nearby. "So you watched everyone?" She gave a small, ashamed nod. "I just wanted control," she admitted. When people started gathering more, I felt invisible. The words hung in the air. It wasn't an excuse, but it was the first honest thing she'd said all night. The supervisor entered briefly, letting her know officers were finishing reports. She thanked him softly, a completely different tone from the angry confrontations earlier. I realized then that the loudest moments of the night weren't really about noise. They were about loneliness. She looked at me carefully. "The police car, it made me nervous." I raised an eyebrow. "Not because of you," she said quickly. "Because it reminded me I couldn't control everything." I didn't know what to say to that. Outside, the neighborhood felt calm again. No shouting, no sirens, just distant music drifting from the park where people were still celebrating. She took a deep breath. "Did the event survive?" I almost smiled. "Best turnout we've ever had." Something softened in her expression, relief mixed with regret. "I didn't mean to ruin it," she whispered. I nodded slowly. "Then don't do it again." She looked down, understanding the weight of what had happened. False emergency calls weren't small mistakes. Consequences would follow, legally and socially. But in that moment, she seemed less like the villain everyone saw, and more like someone who lost their way. I walked toward the door, pausing before leaving. People just wanted to come together, I said. That's all. She didn't answer, but I heard a quiet sniffle behind me. Outside, the supervisor closed his notebook. All done, he said. As I headed back toward the park, I saw neighbors still laughing under string lights, officers helping clean up, kids refusing to go home yet. The community looked stronger than before. The patrol car parked nearby reflected the warm lights softly.
Welcome to Karen Universe, where we dive into every wild, quirky, and intriguing story out there. HOA Karen called 911 claiming our neighborhood was out of control, but it was just a police charity event raising money for families. Officers arrived ready for choice and fund, kids laughing, music playing, and volunteers serving food. When she realized who organized it, her face said everything. If you enjoyed the, don't forget to subscribe to Karen Universe, share with your friends and drop your thoughts in the comments.